live on YouTube. I mean, let's just do it. Go live.
Very exciting.
It says we're live. I don't know.
Listen to this.
So yes, we always start with our theme song, and we have a special theme song in honor of the theme of After Dark. And this was previously composed by Todd Thompson, our guru.
It'll sound better.
Restart it. It's actually like 17 seconds long, so go ahead and restart it.
Yeah. I mean, 17 seconds isn't a lot of waka waka.
It's longer than you think. There we go. All
Just
right.
long enough.
Welcome to what is this podcast called? Aca-Media. We are in Boston. This is SCMS 2024. This is our second annual live episode from SCMS.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
I haven't been to one of these since like my dog was born. It's been dog years.
Dog
I
years,
have
and
like
it's been
a
like 7 years.
Yeah, it's like.
So you weren't. That's right. You weren't in person last year, were you?
I was a little man in a little box.
Oh my gosh!
Computer.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a special moment. I'm getting emotional.
I know. I am too. You think you're getting emotional? Come on.
Last year did feel, surreal is an overused word, but there was something, it just felt strange or different or something like that. It was excellent. Don't get me wrong, but there was just sort of and especially like, I think it was, and perhaps we all still do sort of feel very, kind of, challenged by COVID and all that. And I think we also just had to remember how to conference. Like that was another thing. It had been a few years and you just kind of have to remember how everything works.
I think now it just takes more naps.
More naps?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have lunch breaks, scheduled in. Do we need nap breaks? Is that gotta happen?
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
We have two presidents of the organization in the room and various other dignitaries. So, I mean, if we're going to make it happen, I think these are the people who need to hear the pitch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do want to start with
story time.
Yeah. We've got
cookies and milk. I mean, let's just,
yeah, we should have our PJs on, right? That's another After Dark theme. We are, we did kudos to the folks who organized the reception. This was an even bigger pour than it looks. This is about halfway gone now. So thank you to those who funded the reception. And we do have, so we're going to do some fun things here. We're going to start with,
super fun.
we've got some guests from the board, and from the home office to just chat a little bit about how we got here and what kinds of things we're going to do the next few days. We've got a special guest who has started a new SIG, and we want to talk about the idea of starting a new SIG. And then literally, if anyone in the audience wants to be on the podcast, we'd happy to have you on a podcast. So, so we'll see what happens. All right. So why don't we get Vicky and Leslie, you want to come on up here and join us? We need,
come on.
We need special guest music.
I could play the music again. It's the only music I have handy, but all right. So we have joining us Leslie Lamond, who has been our conference coordinator for
since 1997.
Man, that's amazing.
I think it's 27 years.
Yeah, that's like that. It was like punch cards and stuff.
Yeah, it's olden days.
Wow. All right. So we can spend a little bit of time with you, and maybe we talk to both Les and Vicky together.
Sure.
We also have Victoria Johnson, who's our current president, commander-in-chief, and leader of all things. So what was it like pulling off the conference this time? This is the second fully live conference.
Right.
Was it easier than last year, or is it still like a clunky, broken machine?
I would say it was not easier than last year.
What things were more difficult?
It's just a bigger conference. So just more parts and pieces. That's all. Yeah.
And are we still a big, small organization or a small, big organization. So we're kind of like in
Yes.
the weird cracks.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's really one question I was going to ask about, like, how did we end up in Boston? And I know there's a whole like COVID complexity involved, and
Right.
then there's negotiating with the hotel, and so I'm curious about how, like, in general that worked in this era, and then what do we bring to the table as an organization? What do we lack as an organization that usually they're used to? So like, how did that work that we ended up here in Boston?
So this negotiation happened in 21, I believe. And we normally, every time we try to source Boston, we came here back when we went to the Boston Park Plaza forever ago. We haven't been here since because we haven't been able to get the nightly rate where we wanted it to be. We couldn't get it low enough, but because it was COVID times and all that, they were willing to speak with us again about it.
Mm.
So we came and met them, and we just fit into we fit in a perfect little pocket. There's a conference before us and a conference just after us, and we hit just a perfect little hole. So they were able to take us and meet us where we needed to be in terms of the $199 nightly rate.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how it fell into place.
Okay.
Are we going to stay in this Marchish window in the future, or
We're aiming for late March to early April nowadays. Just
For what reason?
Just because of the hotel
Uh,
availability.
Yeah.
It's easier around like Easter and Passover.
I will say I have to pay a lot of parking at O'Hare for the next 4 days because they were out of economy, and then they had like no one who could tell me. There's like, go to main parking. There's literally nothing called main parking.
Yeah.
And so I just drove around until must be.
Well, and normally this time of year is really not feasible because it's spring break.
That's what literally an attendant said to me, spring break, as if I'm supposed to say, oh yeah, right, sorry, I'll go back home and come back next week. Like, I don't know what I was supposed to do with that information.
Yeah, we haven't been able to get this exact week in a really long time, but just because of all the COVID-ness of it, it worked out this time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Madam President, how does it feel then to be presiding over? I mean, you've been obviously a long time member of SCMS and a board member as well, right? You were secretary once, weren't you? Is that right?
I was a board member, and then I was 3 years or so later secretary,
Okay.
and then 3 years or so later president.
Wow. All
or
right.
President-elect. Yeah.
So how does it feel, and what kinds of things are you looking for over the next few days?
Well, what's great is this year I didn't actually propose to present anything so that I could
Smart.
make sure to move all over the conference and see as much as possible, and try to meet with as many folks as possible. But yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to work with Leslie now since almost 1997.
It feels like
I know we've known each other that long.
so long.
We've definitely known each other that long. So in that sense, it feels like hand in glove, like very familiar. But every city, every conference, every venue is different. Every venue has its own quirks. But we were really pleased with the turnout in terms of registration. It's a pretty big year for us.
It's pretty big, yeah.
And so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't promise the 80-degree swing in temperatures that we had last year.
Right.
With the snowfall and then flip-flops. But
I have to say the very first academic conference I went to, I was an undergrad, and it was in Miami Beach.
Yeah.
And it was before Miami Beach like got all renovated and stuff. And so it was like these like glorious, dingy, old Art Deco hotels. And it was like $50 a night and cheap booze. And I just was on the beach. And
Wow.
so can we do that?
Was that Florida Atlantic?
No, it was like a speech comm, NCA or
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my first SCMS was Dallas, and it was 96. And a
96.
group of us
Ooh.
drove down. A group of us, they were like,
The biosphere.
well, and that was the thing. Like, it was to walk to like fast food. You literally had to walk on a highway.
Yeah.
And so we were mostly just, contained to the hotel. but yeah, like a huge group of us drove down from Wisconsin, Madison, and I got the 3 a.m. shift in Nebraska, and that is unsettling to drive. Like it's just nothingness. But then, yeah, speaking of that, maybe we're talking about too much about drinking here, but that was another vivid memory that, and I can't do a Tino Ballio impression, but my husband and I passed this back and forth often. He said free hooch. He just had this phrase of like free hooch. And so I always remember that being as a conference with free hooch. Thanks.
Well,
to Tino
and
Ballio.
I guess things do kind of come around because this is a conference with free hooch. You managed to set up an open bar for the reception, which is not a small thing. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty nice. How much longer is it open tonight?
It's
They
actually closed.
already
Oh,
closed.
well, so if
Yeah.
you're listening to this, it's too late. Well, we're going to be reminiscing about this. The days of the free hooch.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
Yeah.
So, where are upcoming conferences? What's on the calendar that is visible to
Well,
the
this
to
is
the public
easy
world?
to remember. So next year we're in Chicago,
Okay.
and the year after that we're in Chicago.
Oh, it's Chicago again.
So we can leave our stuff there, right? And just come back.
Yes, yes,
Right.
and that's again because of COVID. We had to cancel conferences there, so we had
So
to
you owe them.
rebook. Correct.
So
So
this is
rather-
not a conspiracy to
Very true.
Yeah.
Rather than writing a check somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000,
Mm.
we decided to hold a back-to-back conference in Chicago.
that seems like probably reasonable.
Probably a smart thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could write me a $300,000 check if you like.
They
But,
can stay in his
Then
house.
we
Same.
have to buy all the hooch.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there wouldn't be free hooch.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why you have to go back there. There's no question about
Right,
that. And then
right.
that means you have to put off going to other coasts or
Right.
going international is still a ways out, right?
And
I mean, that's
Yeah, and
because of the costs.
correct. Yeah, as much as we would love to.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole board is behind the idea. But yeah, we haven't been able to get that
Right.
together right now.
Right.
And then that's as far as we have planned for in-person conferencing, because we thought we would just continue to look at it and see how the membership felt about it. And before we went any further than 2027, that's the last. So 25, 26 are in Chicago. And then 27 is where we haven't
Right.
picked that up
Yeah.
yet.
So
Yeah.
what's the constellation of possibilities there?
Well, we always check everywhere. So we will have been east and then kind of middle. So we'll probably check somewhere towards the west again to see if we can pull that off. It used to be where we literally went, west, middle, east, international, west, middle, east, international. And nowadays it's really, where can we find the best deal? That's what we end up with.
Right.
So, because we just feel like that's what makes the biggest difference to the membership as a whole.
Making it as affordable as possible to as
Right.
many people as possible.
Right. And I will be really interested to find out if I'm pleasantly surprised by the numbers of this conference. And it's getting up to like Toronto was our biggest conference. I'm trying to remember the exact attendance number and it's failing me. It was in the 20s
I
something.
thought it was 27 something.
And we've passed 2,000 here. So, yeah, we're very excited about the numbers here.
Mhm. Well, I know like kind of two of the areas everyone is always interested in is international, right? And
Yeah.
especially like to make it an international organization.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the word hybrid comes up a lot. And I know that's
Right.
something you've looked into and it's a really complex issue. So I wonder if you could speak to both of those, like the complexities of being more international and then the complexities of doing a hybrid conference.
Right. It's really just right now, it's really all about finances. And hybrid, we have priced those out. And again, it's, we can run a in-person conference for about $300 some odd $1,000. And we would run a hybrid conference for about $6,000. So, it's almost double the cost.
Wow.
And is it like the technology that's a huge thing, or the idea of having people here versus not here, or?
And the staff that you have to have to run both
Mhm.
portions
That's right.
of
You're
it.
kind of doubling up staff.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the preparation for it doubles.
Mhm.
It's pretty much everything you think of is you're running two concurrent, you're running two conferences basically.
Yeah.
Is the way to look at it.
Mhm.
So all of that labor, all of those people who are moderating rooms and making sure all the technology is working.
And you have to do the same. So when we do the virtual conference or the virtual symposium, it's the same. Like we have a crew that runs that because there's constant questions
Right.
and constant, you need to fix this, you need to let me into this, you need to. So you have to have people there to service anyone that's having problems or issues.
Mm.
We wouldn't want to just hold something and then let
Right.
people
Right.
flounder.
Yeah.
And so people, I think from the participant side,
Yeah.
that feels like, it just seems like the hybrid is an automatic cost saving
Right.
maneuver, right? Because you don't
Right.
have travel and all that stuff, and that's true. But at the same time, I think a lot of people think about attending a virtual conference and they think like, oh, I have to pay a $150, $200 registration fee. That's outrageous. All I'm doing is sitting in my dining room with headphones on, and I hate it, and I
Yeah.
have to pay $200 to hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds good.
And I think it's true of all of us as a society. Like we all want to be inclusive. We all want all these things. But then when it gets down to it, each year, like our virtual numbers drop off. And so as much as we all, long to be everything to everyone, it seems like the reality of it is that people get sick of being
Yeah.
virtual, and
Yeah.
and it's really, I mean, you all can, it's just as exhausting,
Oh,
if not more
yeah.
so, to attend a full day conference online
Yeah.
as it is in person. So we're absolutely open to it and very much still looking into everything, because we would, in an ideal world, we would have all of the different pieces, right? But right now it's really just about being able to afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the strategies we've adopted to try to address the demand while also, enabling the in-person conference to continue is to really have a robust calendar of online events across the year that are mostly due to the efforts of the SIGs and caucuses, right? And SCMS Plus, there's just been fantastic roundtables, professionalization workshops, book talks, and get-togethers year-round that are enabled through, us all now having to be Zoom fluent because of COVID and transformations in teaching, and yet the in-person conference still operates, in a different register with different outcomes and rationales as well.
Yeah.
And I know that on the board, we've talked about both of those aspects. Like the conference is really important, and especially as a social event, and being able to make friends and network and all that kind of stuff is really important. But we also want SCMS to be more than just the conference. So when you say SCMS, we don't want the first thing we don't want the only thing you to think of is the conference, right? And so that, making it a year-round organization. And so, yeah, shout out to like the comedy SIG and professional development, like the kind of online events they do are just really, really great. And so year-round, you feel like you're part of that group, and you get to, converse with fellow members. And so that stuff is really great.
It sounds like some portion of this is the kind of constant tension between being a moderate sized conference that has a lot of people involved, but is not actually run by a huge organization of full-time folks.
Right.
And so it just takes an awful lot of work to pull things off. Which brings me to maybe a slightly sensitive question that maybe we could talk about just a little bit. I know there's been some upheaval in the office, and one of the ways in which that was manifest this year was in some difficulties with the awards committees. And I know people are frustrated by some of that, and I'm wondering if you can explain just a little bit in a nutshell what happened and where we're kind of going forward to deal with awards.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, for the size of organization that SCMS is, there are other organizations our size that have roughly double the staff, professional staff. And SCMS has always operated quite slim, in part because of how it was originally defined as kind of, there was a home office staff that was sort of split in its obligations between the University of Oklahoma and the society. And now we're basically operating, I guess Leslie can speak much better to this, as a kind of, Leslie's our sort of de facto executive director, as well as our conference planner and organizer, and operates basically as our sort of singular kind of staffer with a collection of folks that help with committee organization. And so one of our really full-time folks, due to a constellation of health concerns, family concerns, and complete overwork, frankly, in terms of how the job had grown, how the organization had grown, and the job had also grown to be defined. And it was just simply unsustainable. And so that staff member resigned, and did so following really a lot of real hard effort put into making this year's awards happen in spite of it all. And so, yeah, because of that resignation, it wasn't possible to immediately turn on a dime and make the awards happen this year.
Well, and
Although
you can't half-ass it, right? I mean, you can't do it halfway. So if you're not...
we are committed to making sure that the graduate student awards be granted by this summer, and that the first book award and that the Kovacs Book Prize be granted for 2024, but be given out at the 2025 ceremony with the 2025 award winners, because, you know, we're very aware of how important those awards are for folks in terms of applications for things, and also just, you know, it's part of who we are as an organization, in terms of celebrating those achievements. So this year, we will, however, make the best of things in celebrating all of our authors who've published books in this year, and giving the awards that are board-determined awards, that aren't committee-determined awards. And that includes our fabulous Distinguished Career Achievement Award event on Friday. And also our organization service awards will be granted on Saturday with the celebration of authors, a recognition of all of the volunteers and committees, including the fabulous program committee this year, and also honoring those that unfortunately we've lost this year. And you know, Leslie works very closely with ACLS. We have talked a lot with our colleague and cognate academic societies. The staffing issue, I think many of you have experienced this on your own university campuses, that staffing has really been hit super hard following COVID. So we're not the only ones experiencing it, but because we were already operating at such slim margins, we take a particularly hard hit. And so obviously this is a key priority for the organization going forward. It's something I'm having meetings about this weekend.
I'm sure you are.
And yeah, you know, the thing is, this situation actually happened in part because the dedication to the organization was so staunch.
Yeah.
And so it's not about the staff member, it's about the workload and the unsustainability of it.
Yeah.
I'll say that's absolutely true. That everyone, we're really fortunate that the people that work for us truly care, and really everybody tries everything they can.
Yeah.
And so,
basically, I mean, because we're in need basically of dedicated folks to do e- aspects of the job that one or two people are currently having to
Yeah.
do all
Mhm,
of.
mhm.
And so that's what we're kind of looking into, seeing how to make it possible to have at least 3 folks that are dedicated to those particular aspects.
Yeah, it's hard to build in redundancy. And honestly, I mean, this is an organization that still runs on, I mean, collectively thinking about the people who are either full-time staff or in unpaid elected positions, it's hundreds of human years of work invested in keeping this thing going for the past, 20 years.
For
Les,
sure.
you've been doing this for more than 25 years.
Yep.
And lots of people who are on the board have been involved,
absolutely.
not working full-time for the organization, but it's an enormous investment of time to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think there's also, a thing to think about. Service counts for us, but how much, I'm putting this on, this is a podcast, but we do have visual
We have
right
scare
now.
quotes.
Like, yeah, like how much does it count, and the hours that are put in? Anyone who's been on a committee, vetting all those books, or the articles or whatever, it's just a lot of time, and it's really prestigious. Like I have, Secretary of SCMS on my CV now, which is great. But if I don't publish a book, I don't go anywhere. I don't get promoted. It's sort of like if you don't do it, it's a problem. If you do it, and that's the reality. And then also to add to that, how increasingly few of us, if that's not a contradiction in terms, are actually tenure track. And so if you're not tenure track, service doesn't matter at all. Right. And so as we're shrinking the population for whom it counts, right? It's really complex to get, and it's not that, as you're saying, it's not like people don't care. It's just like literally you can't get blood from a stone at a certain point.
Well, this is a happy place
wait a
to
minute.
be.
So much for we're tearing up in our drinks.
Yeah. How about something new? Can we talk about something new?
A new SIG.
A new SIG.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been a
thank
tenure.
you.
Thank
Yes.
you,
Thank you.
Les and Vicky, for taking time to talk to us about this stuff. I know this thing is hard to run, and the fact that you managed to pull this off every year with such good humor and apparent mental health is really impressive. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. So we all have our second guest here, and we're gonna make sure we're gonna have her say her own name, so that
Because
then
this
she
is a
can-
thing. This is there's been a grave injustice here that has been perpetrated, and we're going to set it straight.
Okay, for many years, I mispronounced my own name,
Which
as,
is
as Aniko Bodrikozy. But then I realized that my mother was correct when she said, I gave you a beautiful name and you've been mispronouncing it your entire life. It's Aniko. So I moved from my previous institution to the University of Virginia in 2001, and then just decided I am going to start introducing my name with the correct pronunciation. So all of my friends and colleagues, like you guys from Madison, go Badgers.
so it's a little bit of a shibboleth, right? I mean, it calls out, like, it's a way you can identify people from your cheesehead past, the people with the tin ears who don't listen, and they're like, hey, Nico, how you doing?
It's friends from a particular point in my
Yeah.
life. It's like, yes, we were all mispronouncing my name.
And I kind of like, I mean, I teach your work a lot. So I kind of like that we're here struggling over whether your name is Aniko or Aniko and not how to pronounce Bodrikozy.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
when I
teach your work, I have to, like, help them work through that. And that's
And I have to do it every time I teach a new class. The first thing is phoneticizing the professor's name.
yeah.
So yes, I feel your pain.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So that is a long introduction to Aniko Bodrikozy from University of Virginia.
Wahoo!
TV historian who has been doing yeoman work in putting together a new TV history SIG. So can you give us a quick blurb on what this is about?
Yes, well, this is something that my dear friend and colleague Allison Perlman and I from UC Irvine have have wanted to do, and it all started, and this is also kind of a COVID story. We had spent a number of years wanting to put a conference together to bring together broadcast historians, radio and television historians, and would piggyback onto the Radio Preservation Task Force conference that are also our University of Wisconsin-Madison colleague. It's like, hey, Madison folks rule the world when it comes to our field. Just saying.
There might be some disagreement out there, but I mean, I'm not stopping you.
Especially when it comes to media history.
Yeah. And
So-
particularly television history.
especially television history. So initially we were going to run that conference in 2020, then something happened. I can't quite remember, something in the spring of 2020. We finally were able to do that conference again, piggybacking with the Radio Preservation Task Force. Last year, a year ago, at the Library of Congress, and had such a fabulous turnout. And we're thinking, okay, what are the next things we need to do to build this vibrant community of radio television historians? It's like, oh, well, we should try to create a new scholarly interest group at SCMS. That should be easy. It took a certain amount of work, but
eventually the white smoke went up through the chimney and it was done.
and yes,
Yeah.
and the powers that be at the society said yes, and so we now have a television and radio historians scholarly interest group. There were a whole bunch of panels we wanted to put our name onto, but we are only allowed to do that for 8. I don't understand why that is, but so it's exciting because we want our colleagues in this society to know that historical work is being done in our field. We want to encourage it, international as well as US. That's a big thing. We also want to be able to encourage junior scholars and grad students. Like, yes, there's a community here. We would like to help you with your research if you want to pursue work in this field. And also just, history is important. History matters. And so, yeah, and we're excited. This is our first conference where we exist.
Nice.
So yes, come and find us.
Excellent.
We will. We're supposed to do our first breakfast gathering because all the evening times were taken by other great SIGs.
The new ones always get the worst spots, right? You gotta horn your way in there to the good spots.
Yeah. So we're doing a Sunday breakfast. So if you're interested, get in touch with me. Join our Broadcast Historians Facebook page, which I moderate. But yes, we're very excited.
Nice. Now thinking about the larger issue of SIGs, how many SIGs do we have? Les?
It's less
It's 40. It's like in the high 40s.
Wow.
high 40s. She said, if you didn't hear that.
Wow.
Okay.
And essentially SIGs are research topic focused, whereas caucuses are researcher focused. Is that fair to say?
Leslie's nodding.
Yeah. So caucuses are for people with particular identity formations or groups, or who have particular national or regional backgrounds, right? Whereas the SIGs are are about research object or research method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing we talked about in discussing the SIG, and then also it came up on the board discussion about approving it, was, will this, step on anyone else's toes, or will this cannibalize another SIG? And I think your point is really important, because there is, and this is not to criticize any SIG or anything like that, but there is a kind of presentist impulse for a lot of SIGs. And so that idea of like carving out a space for history. So it's not just history as part of a thing, but it's its own thing. And I think that's a really important point, and a reason for this SIG to be important.
Right. Yeah. Because if you're doing historical work in television and radio, I mean, there are particular methodologies, there are particular kind of issues that that you need to deal with as a scholar. And I mean, I have gotten onto plenty of platforms about, well, television, particularly television, because that's my area. Television studies tends to be very focused on the present, chasing whatever the industry is focused on.
Mhm.
And that's completely valid. But and again, I'm speaking from my own areas of interest, obviously, but I think if we want particularly television studies to really be taken seriously as a field, I think historical approaches to the medium, the audiences, the industry, that needs to be a bigger part of particularly television studies. I don't think this is as much an issue with radio studies. I think the study of radio really does have a good historical kind of foundation in that particular subfield.
Partly because its glory days are gone, right? I mean, it's true. It's true. I mean, institutionally, radio is not the force that it once was, and so there's a kind of a natural impulse towards kind of turning back historically.
And we can say the same thing about television, because what is television now? Is it streaming? Is that television?
Well, this is I'm looking at Michael, because this is one of his big things in teaching our history of television class, which we're re-envisioning now. And do we make it a 2-semester thing? And this question of like, they can take 2 semesters, and do they still understand what television is as an object? It's a different conversation for film.
And at the risk of being sort of crassly,
it's after dark.
This is really, I'm thinking that there's actually something really, I think, potentially useful about being a member of these kinds of SIGs and the kind of legitimizing function they serve in somebody's research portfolio and how they present their work within their own institution. I am the only person in our film, television, and theater department who teaches a course that is recognized as fulfilling a university history requirement. And that took months of paperwork and, like a lot of words to justify. And that kind of, credentialing is part of what we do as an institution and as an organization, and actually building mechanisms to help people articulate their value and how they're participating in larger conversations is actually not a terrible thing.
Yeah. But also there was an exchange on Facebook between you and Ethan Thompson. I think it was like last week. So Ethan, I believe, is working on a book on MTV. And he posted something like, can someone tell me, ask me what I'm doing, a research topic where, just like overwhelming amounts of really small things. You've got to watch all of these things. And you responded like, I'm writing a book about 4 days. and that notion of like, that is so important to kind of respect what you can learn by studying 4 days, and your work in particular in the wake of John F. Kennedy's assassination. And so I love that notion of how important that kind of fine grained detail, and you have to look at it, right? So to explain what MTV is, yes, you have to watch all of that and understand it. And to understand these 4 days, you have to, dig into that fine grained detail. And as you say, that's part of what the, history methodologies are all about.
Right. Yeah. And that. I think that's one of the reasons that I think particularly for grad students and junior scholars, it's like, it's kind of like being an anthropologist. Oh, I have to go out into the field. I have to spend a lot of time someplace else, and how do I finance that? And how, so the mechanisms of doing the kind of historical work, particularly in broadcasting history. I mean, I just spent the last week at the Library of Congress at the Motion Picture Broadcasting Recorded Sound Division, like one of my favorite places as a scholar, on a Steenbeck machine for 7 hours a day.
That's a lot of Dramamine.
And I'm just looking at one day of the 4 days of coverage of NBC's coverage of the Kennedy assassination, culminating in the state funeral. And I was just watching the coverage of the state funeral. And that's almost a full week of intensive research. And so one of the issues, and I think this is one thing that having a community of scholars through something like a SIG, that we can kind of grapple with just the methodological dilemma of having to deal with the time of screening and studying large amounts of material, because you often have to screen it in real time. I mean, if you're going to the Library of Congress and you're sitting on a
flipping through the
machine,
pages.
There's no, just scanning for keywords or
and you don't know if you're going to find the thing, right? The smoking gun. It might not appropriate to be to mention that metaphor here, but that one thing, there's the thing that makes my research happen. Yeah.
But sometimes what it is sitting with the broadcast and sitting with the experience of it. That's
the totality
what I
of it all.
discovered in watching all this funeral coverage this is the experience that millions and millions of Americans were having. And
so it's back to flow.
Well, yes.
Kind of is. Yeah. I don't want to have this become just the TV historians podcast, but I would encourage anybody who's interested to follow up with Aca, or honestly me or Chris or Allison Perlman if they're interested in this kind of stuff, and also to pay attention to the other SIGs. SIGs are a really important place to connect with folks who are your intellectual compatriots, and they're also a really important mechanism by which the entire organization replicates itself, and there's a lot of energy that comes from that kind of work. So if this is not the SIG for you, maybe another one is.
Yeah, and just the importance of SIGs. I mean, I remember, because we were probably all involved with the television studies SIG.
Yeah, the very first one.
The very first one. And what did that lead to? That led to the M.
Yeah.
In SCMS. That started the process of opening up what this society actually, what we study.
Yeah.
What we value as objects of study. So SIGs really do, I think, help to expand what our objects of studies are, what our areas of focus are, what SCMS encompasses.
Absolutely. As we head toward wrapping up tonight, I was wondering if we could talk about Boston a little bit, because here we are. Thank you, Aca. we don't have a lot of locals, but I do see that we have one person who's she's shaking her head no, waving me off. The thing is, if only there was someone in the room who knew more about Boston than us. Because I mean, I could talk about my Boston. I graduated from Emerson College in 1994. So I could talk about going to Harvard Square and going to Elsie's for a hot beef sandwich, but Elsie's has been gone for 30 years. So that's probably not going to help anybody very much.
Yeah.
What do you got? What have
been
you found
here-
in town that you really feel like you need to pay attention to and to get the most out of this place and enjoy it?
Well, the Red Sox, but they're not playing yet. I don't know. Like, I've only been here like twice, and like I think both times for SCMS. So yeah, I don't know.
Man, if only there was somebody who could help us. What's it like to live in? Yeah?
Come on down.
Where should we go to lunch?
For lobster rolls, Luke's Lobster.
Lobster rolls.
Yeah.
Luke's
Luke's
Lobster.
Lobster. See, this is good. This is good.
And it's right next to the Boston Public Library, which has never been Boston.
Oh, the Boston Public Library is freaking fantastic. Yeah. And we're right near the Museum of Fine Arts.
That's an amazing place too. So.
Really, really great museum if you want to sneak away from the conference for a little bit and go get some culture. That's good. Okay, other hot tips. Quick one. Newberry Street, wander down Newberry Street. Is there still like the Doc Martens store there and Fluvogs and stuff, or is that stuff all gone? Some fancy stuff. Go to the garden. Yeah. Other stuff for lunch.
Raisin Canes. Shout out to Miles McNutt.
Okay. Raisin cane. Okay. You know what we should probably do? We should probably have like certified locals who like I don't know, they wear like a Red Sox hat or something.
Yeah.
Like people who you could like go up to
Yeah.
and so that you would like not ask amazingly embarrassingly stupid questions, but kind of get like, a little bit of help.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Boston though, so somebody might just send somebody out to walk the Freedom Trail just for fun, like, you know, go to Bunker Hill. But just walk.
That's
Just walk. Just walk. I'll share my favorite. I mean, I'm going tomorrow. I have to go to the Modern to get a cannoli, a fresh cannoli made by a little old lady who stuffs it right then, right there.
And where is this?
It's in the North End. It's right there on, what's the main drag of the North End? Hanover Street. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you don't even have to like crawl through the freeway to get there anymore. It's just like you can walk right through Government Center and it's all party and
We've come a
it's
long
nice.
way.
We have come a long way, baby. All right.
I also just want to give a shout out to our next episode because it's really amazing. I'm super excited to get it out. And this is Jonathan Nichols Pethick, who's one of our producers, and he interviewed Jake Smith. And Jake has two. I mean, I don't know if there's a word because I would say audiobooks, but you would imagine just someone reading a book. But this is audiobook as kind of like you would think of a video essay as a special form of scholarship. That's what this is. And so he's got a book about a radio show and then a book about how radio waves can affect birds. And these are gorgeous books and they're open access. And so Jonathan talks with Jake about doing this kind of scholarship. So speaking of a new type of scholarship, and just the same way, you know, video essays were important for showing the visual material that we're analyzing. He's analyzing audio work, and so an audiobook. And so it's a really great interview with some really cool clips. So look for that in our next episode.
Nice. And when you're walking around Boston, use your ears too. It's spring.
Yeah.
The birdies are out. I remember one time walking through the public garden on my way to class and just happened to look up, and like 15 feet up a tree was a peregrine falcon disassembling a pigeon in glorious and spectacular fashion. But
Wow.
there's a wild world out there too. So use your ears to discover it, and your eyes, and
That's a great
enjoy your time here.
visual image to end an After Dark podcast
Yeah.
with. So thank you for that.
Next week, owls.
All right.
All right.
Thank you all for paying attention, and thank you all
Thank
for
you,
coming.
Victoria Johnson, Leslie
Yes.
Lamond, Annika Bodrikozy, and all of our other guests.
All right.
Bye. Have a good conference.
All right, I think end. All right.
Woohoo! You guys are all very